Hello and welcome to the jungle. My name is sponsored by the wonderful folks at Blue Wire Cincinnati Bengals podcast here, coming at you on a Friday. It's a great day here in Oxford, Ohio. I'm joined alongside Caroline Palmer. Once again, we have a loaded show today. Caroline, I'm going to start off with a quote. I think he should be happy at certain rates that maybe he doesn't think he'd be happy at. I think some of it's him to be happy at some point, and if he's not, that's what holds it up sometimes. So, it takes to say yes, it takes a lot to say yes to something. And also, we have all the respect in the world for him. He's been a great player. We're happy to have him. And so maybe we'll find a way to get something to work. We're just going to see where it goes. Cincinnati Bengals in a nutshell, in a quote there, Caroline.
Yes, we talked a lot about how they've kind of taken a step forward with the Jamar Chase T. Higgins saga, and this kind of sounds like the Bengals organization that we are more familiar to seeing is this type of just kind of jumping around the point but not exactly hitting it. So, I
So
guess welcome back.
This, of course, was Katie Blackburn's comments at the owners' meeting about the potential Trey Hendrickson contract situation. I kind of thought we were close a couple weeks ago. Seems like we're so far away, and now both sides have started to kind of air their grievances. I'd say in the process.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think we've hit that point where, especially from Hendrickson's side, I think and he said it on Pat McAfee, which we will go into that, but
Hmm.
he talked about how the market with defensive ends, which I said it a couple weeks ago, it's higher than it's been in the last 10 years, this particular offseason. And he just wants the money. And I think he wants to be loyal to Cincinnati. I think he's been very profound about the fact that Cincinnati is his primary destination place. But I think at this point, and honestly, before I said a lot from the agent side of things, or like the agent was pushing it, now I feel like we're reaching the stage where this is actually starting to impact Hendrickson and
Hmm.
not just like the agent trying to get him money. Like I think this is like starting to impact like his well-being of like, do they really want me to stay? And I think that's
Totally.
where we're kind of hearing a little bit more of this emotion, particularly coming from him, because this is now something that's impacting like him, his life. Where is he going to live? Is he going to play? Like those things, we're starting to see it become a
Yeah.
little bit more personal instead of transactional.
Well, in it started as a transactional thing, like you said, and there's just so many things in this quote to kind of unpack. It's She's basically saying that he should be happy with what they're giving him, and the Bengals aren't going to, excuse me, aren't going to really budge on what their prices are. The Bengals have made it clear through this negotiation process that they aren't comfortable doing a more than a 2-year extension with the 30-year-old Trey Hendrickson. Trey
Mhm.
Hendrickson feels the opposite, obviously, or else we would have had a deal. The one part that really bothers me about the quote is that she says, and I think he should be happy at certain rates that maybe he doesn't think he'd be happy at. I just think that's really disrespectful to the NFL player empowerment era as a whole. And honestly, Trey Hendrickson, then she tries to kind of circle it back and say, we're happy to have him. We have all the respect in the world with him, but you're really not showing him that much respect if you're saying this kind of stuff about one of your top 4 or 5 players on your team.
Yeah, the only thing that I will say is at the very beginning of this whole thing, we talked about how the Bengals laid like 30, 32 million out for him and he didn't take it. So I think
Hmm.
that is where that whole thing is coming from because for a 30-year-old who I guess he's still in his prime, but age-wise, they are expected to decline at that position after they reach 30 for the most part. The fact that he was still able to get 32 million for I think that was the annual salary for his extension originally. I can understand from an ownership perspective where that saying could make sense, but I do agree as when you take Hendrickson, someone who has been very loyal to Cincinnati, openly speaks about the fact that he basically had been prepped by Hubbard to take the leadership role that he was going to vacate
Yeah.
after the end of last season. He was being prepped for it. He was being trained for it. The players respect him. The staff respect him. And I can understand how he can be a little bit upset with ownership because at the end of the day, like if it was down to the staff and the players, this saga would have been done 2 months ago. But
Hmm.
it's not up to them at the end of the day. It's up to the big guys in the office, and they have the least amount of contact with the organization. So I can understand the frustration there, and you're starting to see it a little bit in the way that he's starting to creep into the media a little bit, almost to try to force their hand. Like, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, because when did this whole thing blow up? When both of them went to the media about it, and both of
Yeah,
them whatever. So I think he's kind of taking a page out of that book and being like, well, it worked for them. This is like my final push. Can I get them to budge, or am I going to have to jump ship? Like, I feel like this is kind of like his
yeah.
last final move to try to stay as a Bengal.
It does seem like that, and I I kudos to the Pat McAfee show because this is just great media in a sense that
Mhm,
obviously they're gonna have him on the next day. Like this is it's a big NFL storyline, and he's been very I guess he has some sort of relationship with them now because it's the second time he's been on with them in this offseason saga. And I think that interview brought up some great points. I love the Pat McAfee show. I think it's a great program because I think it allows these players to kind of be brutally honest in a way that some programs don't allow them to be. And really, I give Trey Hendrickson a lot of kudos here. Thought it was an April Fool's joke, and of course, it came out on April 1st. Everyone's always weary of information on that day,
mhm,
anyways. And it kind of did seem like one. He said that those comments from Katie Blackburn were definitely disappointing, and the communication has been poor over the last couple of months. And there's a list of things I read in an article that kind of highlighted some of the timeline and grievances through all of this. Apparently, Henderson was promised a new deal this offseason by the Bengals at the
mhm,
beginning of this offseason campaign. And he's also now said that he does not need to be the highest paid player at his position, which makes me think that this is all coming down to the amount of years on the extension. I've been thinking that the money has never been I've on record saying that the NFL in the money scenario kind of just fluctuates and it in some senses isn't real because the salary cap, money is money in different years and stuff like that. That's a whole nother conversation. I've always been in the sense that the Bengals have the money to pay Trey Hendrickson. Whether they do or not, I don't really know because I don't really understand the cap. But
mhm.
I think it all comes down to he wants, excuse me, long-term security into his 30s. The Bengals only want to do that for 1 or 2 more years because it already has another year on this contract.
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna talk about the highest paid stuff too, because I
Yeah,
think at the beginning,
I think
they
that's a
were
really interesting
expecting
point.
a big contract, I think, especially given off the season. Like, he had a better statistical season than Myles Garrett. He had a better statistical season than Max Crosby, who both got these mega contracts. Granted, they're younger. And then this whole situation that's going on in Dallas with Micah Parsons is gonna be, if the Dallas Cowboys figure out how to sign Micah Parsons before the Bengals figure out how to do this Trey Hendrickson
Oh,
deal,
it's over.
that's when I would sign the sirens would go off in my head,
Mhm.
because if there's anyone who takes longer than the Bengals, it's the Cowboys and Jerry Jones to do literally
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So if they somehow manage to beat them to it, if I was Hendrickson, I would just be like, this should probably be my sign to be out the door. But I I do think it's interesting that they've changed their stance now on being one of the highest paid, because again, it ties back to what we discussed at the beginning of just how loyal he is to Cincinnati, which I think that should be something they want to keep. I said on, I think it was the podcast about the first day of free agency, you don't see that a lot anymore. Like,
No.
you don't see these players, top tier players, who are choosing loyalty over like money, or like, or they're not putting money first. I mean, Myles Garrett is a very good example. Came out, started talking, talking, talking. Oh, I want to be on a contender. I want to be on a contender. Stayed with the Browns for this big money deal. Like,
Mhm.
it's the direction the NFL is going because the salary cap is going up. So I just think, like, as a, like, even if they don't want him like for much of like a player, use him as a mentor. I mean, he has the ability to be a starter, but if I'm thinking ownership brain, there he has way more of a capability than just the on field, which is like why I'm a little concerned of why it's taking so long at this point.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think. I mean, they dragged Sam Hubbard out there for the last 2 years, and he was terrible. And they cut him, which is a and he retired subsequently. But like they I trust Trey Hendrickson's ability to take a risk and roll out there. I mean, obviously their ages weren't the same, but it's the same sort of, in my opinion, thought process here.
Yeah.
The Bengals were willing to sacrifice a position of need for a guy that they had respect for, and then he pretty much put up 2 stinkers of a season. I'd be willing if I were the Bengals. And the other guy they had a lot of guaranteed money wrapped up in too, was Sam Hubbard.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't you do this from a pure football standpoint? Because he's a lot more established than Sam Hubbard. I trust his ability to kinda be an older defensive end and still produce, maybe
Mhm.
not high level, but at a Pro Bowl type level. That's
Yeah.
he's oh, yeah, so it's like stuff like that. He's not gonna do 17 again. I mean, I don't
Mm-mm.
wanna make that claim, but find that very
Highly unlikely.
yes. So he I trust the main point is I trust his ability if he wants to do 2 or 3 more years here and the Bengals can come to terms with that. I trust that more than what I saw from Sam Hubbard these last 2 seasons.
Absolutely. I agree. I think his ability is a lot better. We've talked a lot about consistency. Like over the last 5 seasons, he's recorded double-digit sacks in all 5 of them leading up to the age of 30. So, yeah, maybe you're not gonna get the league sack leader again and runner-up and defensive player of the
And you
year, but
don't
you're still
need
gonna
that.
and you don't need that. If you're bringing in these new guys, like we've talked about who the Bengals are bringing in, like, you're bringing in people that are gonna provide to take the weight off of him because he was a one-man show last year, let's be
Yeah.
frank. Like, he was a one-man show on that defense, and the only reason defense got anything done was with Trey Hendrickson either got to the ball or got to the quarterback. That was it.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't see anything in the secondary. Linebackers were average at best. Like, you just need somebody who's gonna be your, like, leader on that side of the ball, and
Mhm.
he not only I think is in the way that he plays, but he's also very vocal about it, and I watched the Pat McAfee interview yesterday, and I'm just almost thinking, how much longer is he gonna just wait, or when is he gonna flip the corner and be like, "You know what? You're not respecting me. There's 31 other teams in the league." Well, maybe not New
Yeah.
Orleans because 'cause they're like a gazillion dollars over the cap, but, like, there's 30 other organizations in the league that would be happy to have me and would be happy to pay this money, and they didn't just drop $69 million a year on 2 wide receivers.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they're, like, freaking out because they spent so much money, but, like, at what point does Hendrickson go to his agent and the Bengals and go, "You know what? I've waited long enough. You obviously don't respect me enough to give me this money. There's plenty of organizations out there that'll give it to me, and at this point, I need money. I need to provide for myself. I need to provide for my family. I wanna play football." And right now, it just doesn't seem like the Bengals are the direction. So I'm just, like, I'm very interested how these conversations are going because, like, I'm thinking of, like, if I was in this situation, I would probably be talking to outside sources
Yeah.
more than the Bengals, even if that's a ploy to play the Bengals' hand. Like,
Yeah.
even if he just uses that to force them into making a deal, like, if I was him, I'd start looking elsewhere at this point just because I think the organization is not handling this correctly, especially
Mhm.
when you put it side by side with particularly the T. Higgins side of the Chase Higgins saga. It's a little bit upsetting for him because this has been kind of dragged out for a little bit longer than T. Higgins was.
Yeah, and if for the Bengals, you can't have it both ways. You can't have him he's been so clear with his needs, and the Bengals are treating him in the trade market as a top tier defender. They're asking for first round picks. The asking price has been quote unquote absurd. Teams don't want to deal with the Bengals now because there's just so much they want out of this deal. So on the one hand, you have the Bengals wanting to cash in on his talent, and at the same
Mhm.
time, the way they're negotiating these contracts aren't respecting that. So that you can't have it both ways.
No.
Either treat it the same and give him the money he wants, or trade him for his value, which is probably a late second round pick at
Mhm.
best, which I'm fine
Yeah.
trading for, by the way. Or give him the money and it's pretty much even and everyone's happy at some point because like you said, now we're getting to the point now where even if he signs a deal, who the heck knows if he's going to enjoy these next couple years because it's just been such a disaster. I mean, I named the episode title is Trey Hendrickson Saga. It's turned into now it's just getting messy. And
Yeah.
that's the worst spot you want to be if you're in a high level negotiation here.
Absolutely, especially because the Bengals got so much praise for what they did,
Yeah.
1, in the offseason, and 2, how they handled the Chase Higgins situation. They were in a very good place organizationally. People were like, "Wow, they've taken a turn in the right direction. They look like they're gonna be a little bit more active in how they negotiate deals." And now if you're a Bengals fan, you're looking at this and be like, "What? Like, what's going on?"
Mhm.
Like, well, we just took this big step, and now I feel like we're just like it's almost like I can't think of the correct, like, analogy for it at the moment, but it's almost like both sides are just waiting for the other one to make a mistake so they have an
Yeah,
outlet. And
you're
it's
right.
kind of like this
That's
weird
a good way to put it.
stare it's like this weird stare down, but nobody's moving because both sides are waiting for the other person, and you're not gonna get anywhere if either side
And no
doesn't
one's gonna
move.
budge. Yeah.
No, so it's just a standoff now, which is honestly worse than I'd argue getting cut, because then at least once you're cut, you can go somewhere else. Like, he honestly, like you said earlier, he's trapped. At this point, if the
Mhm.
Bengals aren't willing to do anything, he's trapped.
Yeah, and he feels like that. So we'll see kinda where this goes. Trey Hendrickson has been very vocal about it now, and the media has kinda taken that and gone, but in more news of the Bengals offseason money, stuff, money spending spree is another monetary thing the Bengals need some help with this time from the city of Cincinnati, and this is something I knew was coming up. I think a lot of Bengals fans knew was coming up, but it was kind of just always placed on the back burner. And I'll give the Bengals credit after we go through over all of this, is that this is not a unique thing to them because of course, we're talking about potential new stadium deal. Is the Bengals want renovations in their downtown Paul Brown Paycor Stadium, whatever you want to call it. The city of Cincinnati has hired a consulting agency to help negotiate these terms. It seems like both sides are far apart. Katie Blackburn said the deals negotiations are neutral. Wish there was more. This is funny. I thought this was pretty rich. Was that she said, "We wish there was a little more urgency and it was moving faster." So that's funny that the Bengals want their new stadium deal done quick, but cannot treat their own players with the same respect. So I think it's interesting. Obviously, this is still a little bit of a ways away because the Bengals can technically play this whole season. Actually, they have option to pick up um a 2-year lease option before June 30th. So it is actually kind of coming up. But
Yeah.
the stadium deal expires for good if they don't pick it up on June 30th, 2026. Now, Caroline, I think you know about this. This isn't something just unique to Cincinnati. This is happening all
Mhm.
across the NFL with these teams are threatening to move to other parts of the city to move away from where they are and because they want these state-of-the-art stadiums. And we learned this in class at one point is that they want the public, more importantly, the city, to pay for a lot of this most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. The Panthers just went through this not that long
Yeah.
ago with Dave Tepper, so I've experienced a lot, read a lot about this. It's very interesting because the NFL, particularly in the US, you see it like, I mean, recently they talked about all their new international expansion franchise places. They added Abu Dhabi to the list, I think. And the NFL is becoming a tourist attraction, and that's
Mhm.
great. It shows the love of sports or whatever. And but the problem with that is now because of that, tourist attractions are usually taxed. They're usually paid
Yeah.
by citizens, they're usually paid by the cities. So it is an amazing thing that we are drawing people to either come to the US or do things otherwise so that we're playing in these stadiums. And when you go to England and you play at Wembley, that's a 90,000, sometimes 100,000 capacity stadium, depending on the
Yeah.
purpose of which you use it. We don't have any of those for NFL stadiums in the United States. And we there's a lot of these teams that could sell those out, let's be frank. In these larger markets, they could sell them. And that's just how it is. But because we're switching to more of like that tourist side, we're starting to see a little bit more of the analytics and the data and the research come out on it where the city, the citizens, the people are going to get taxed for it.
Mm.
And a lot of times they're like, no. Like, the Panthers wanted to move from Charlotte to South Carolina because there was space for them to move for this big stadium, but the people of South Carolina were like, "No, we're not gonna pay for it." So they almost blocked the Panthers from moving because they were
Mm.
like, "We're not gonna pay for it in your new space." And when I saw this, I was just like, "Where would they even go?"
Yeah.
Because it's not like there's a lot of room in Cincinnati for them to just unless they, like, blow down a bunch of current, like, industrial bank buildings, there's not much for them to do in Cincinnati. They'd almost
No.
have to relocate. So
The
I thought this was interesting because I was like, "Where are you gonna go?" Like, there's not much room
yeah.
because the Reds are already taking up the only other green space you have.
That is true. I think it's interesting because the plans they have, and I actually will side with the Bengals on this because I think a part of this, I think the city should probably give them a new stadium because this one's old. It is They've put some money into it now. Why not cash in while the Bengals are kind of more popular? And I also just think they're kind of due for a stadium. They don't need a new stadium. The Bengals, that's not really even what they're asking. They just want some renovations. They want to move pretty much everything. They want to have a central media, like offices, all that kind of stuff. And the original plans do have them picking up some of the surrounding buildings and cashing it
Mhm.
out downtown, which I think would be pretty sweet. So at the same time, is relocation out of the picture? I mean, I'm not going to say 100% no, because then Katie Blackburn says, I guess technically we can go anywhere after this lease is done. And yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But I, the Bengals almost moved to Los Angeles in the 90s and 2000s when they didn't have a team out there, and then Bengals were terrible and they just needed something else. Ended up staying, got the new stadium deal with Paycor. The I just don't see a world where the Bengals leave, and here's why: is because worst case scenario, they move to Northern Kentucky, and there's space in the Covington area. There's space in, even if you want to go a little more south, they would find an area there. I just Now watch out, because the media and stuff like that is going to make it seem like the Bengals are going to move to Columbus or St. Louis or San Diego, because those are open cities, and this happens every year when someone is like with their stadium leases done. Bengals would be stupid to leave Cincinnati, in my opinion. And
Mhm.
I truly believe something will get done with this stadium downtown, because it is prime real estate too. It wouldn't also really make sense for the Bengals to leave the downtown area, and they said that in their in their interviews here.
Yeah, I agree. I think the media takes these and blows them into things where even like they'll use the words like not perfect, messy, unorganized, just to kind of make us think, oh my gosh, is something going to happen? It's your generic clickbait article about this stuff. Stadium deals are one of the hardest
They're
things to
so yeah,
negotiate anywhere. Like this negotiation for this specific lease has probably been going on for probably 4 years. Like I
yeah,
would almost guarantee that this has been going on for 3 plus years. We're just hearing about it now because of that June 30th date. So
yeah,
for the
because now
people
it's real.
inside the organization, they're probably like, this isn't new to us. Like the media
Yeah,
just found out because the people who read the lease dates have all of a sudden noticed that that date's coming up, but we've known that for 5 years now. So it's
yeah.
like, it's kind of just like, I'm not too worried about it. And I know
No,
that the
I
Bengals,
wouldn't be
the
worried at
Cincinnati,
all.
yeah, and Cincinnati's a unique market in terms of, like, what it offers, and Cincinnati's also just, like, a growing city. It's kind of a lot like how the Panthers were in Charlotte, where Charlotte was a growing market, so if they were to move, it just would not really correlate with, like, money, which is what all
Hmm.
these organizations care about at the end
Yeah.
of the day is profit, making money. Cincinnati is growing in terms of population, in terms of just people working there, moving into the nearby areas. Like, I think it would be almost harmful if they were to relocate. I don't think they're going to, but I
Hmm.
almost think that because of that aspect, if you look outside of the sports world and just look at generic Cincinnati, Ohio information, like demographically, I think it would be not the smartest move to relocate. But again, we're just throwing hypotheticals in the wind right now.
This is
So
all,
we
yeah,
don't know
this
anything.
really doesn't have any traction, in my opinion.
No.
Obviously, the Bengals want to get a deal done. I also
Yeah.
think Hamilton County, in their best interest, is to keep the Bengals too. And they brought this guy on not to stiff arm the Bengals, it's to get the best deal that works for both sides. I feel like
Yeah.
this might be the biggest no-brainer thing the Bengals do ever, is like it just. And the other thing is you really don't see that many teams move around, and there's also
No.
not that many big markets available left. Like
Yeah.
there's not a now here's the thing: if there wasn't a Vegas or two LA teams, or I mean, it's like then maybe this is a real conversation we're having, because
Yeah.
those markets are so much bigger. And I mean, like, say what you want about the Raiders, but you got to believe that they're doing so much better financially with their brand
Yeah.
spanking new stadium now, but that hasn't translated the team's success. So I
Mm-mm.
mean, like, the Rams won their Super Bowl, they beat the Bengals, we all know that.
Yeah.
But like, the Chargers have been good, but they're supposed to be great, and they're just like, it's like it doesn't really correlate to team success
No.
most of the time. And it's more just like we said this, and this is what how this league runs. And it is billionaires trying to make more money,
More
which is
money.
fine, but it's just gets messy when it's when they don't wanna when they don't wanna stiff up some of the money, and that's
Yeah.
basically what the county is saying, is that, "Hey, you can afford this, why don't you help out a little bit?" It's like, "Well, we have this deal that you can help out the too," and then it comes out of the
Mhm.
taxpayers, it's, like, all just great city planning stuff, but if I had to guess, Bengals get a new stadium in some shape or form, and
Yeah.
0% chance they leave Cincinnati, but, oh
Yep,
well.
I'd have to agree. If we go, like, super out there, the only place I could potentially see anyone, not just the Bengals, because I would assume there's multiple teams in the league whose things run out. Only place I could potentially see is San Diego, just because California is
Yeah,
always just huge, and they do have that stadium there from when the Chargers used to be there. But, I mean, obviously, the Chargers left for a reason, so it's still also really, like, improbable, but I agree with you. I think that it's fun to, like, think of what they could do, but it in reality,
yeah.
it's a lot more boring just if you like, just because, I mean, the transaction itself is a lot more boring than anything you see, but it's the off season, we don't have much to talk about, so
It's true, and I kinda wanna stay on this for a second because it is kind of interesting, and about just
yeah.
potential destinations just across the NFL is I always have thought St. Louis is so appealing because I got some buddies from there, and they remember when the Rams moved, and
Mhm,
it's from what they told me is that there was such a really strong Rams contingency there, and I think a lot of it came down to was that Kroenke owned the Rams, and he wanted to get into LA, which
mhm,
it's some step of the way you can respect. I would rather move an NFL team, period, to St. Louis because I think because they love the Cardinals down there. I mean, I'm a
yeah,
Reds guy. I'm not particularly fond of St. Louis for their baseball program, but it's a great city, and all the people I know there are great, and they have this I don't know. I just remember he was telling me because he was like 12 that it was a big deal when the Rams left because you don't see that often. And he just made it seem like there is this big Rams contingency there because it's your hometown team. Why are you not going to support and cheer for them? It's just I don't know. It's just weird because it's a lot bigger than X's and O's. Like a contract negotiation between a singular player and a organization. It's basically just a one-on-one conversation. This is between the some of the most important people in the city, the most important people on the Bengals, and then all of the residents of the county. So you're
mhm,
dealing with an exponentially larger group of people, and that's where you see these opportunities stem and these tensions rise kind of along the way. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just interesting. Just an interesting thought
mhm,
process. It's just cool because you really don't see that many things move around. I
n
mean, it was devastating for
no.
Oakland, but
Yeah. You see it a
we'll
lot
see.
more in, like, baseball and basketball than you do in the
Mhm.
NFL just because
Yeah,
they not that it's easier for them to move, but it's not as much work just because the
it's
stadiums for the league are a little bit bigger than NBA and MLB.
it's also, like, really not easy to we've gone super off topic, but it's such a hassle to move organizations, like, regardless of sport.
Yeah.
It's I knowing the Bengals, it seems like something they would never wanna deal with just from a pure, fundamentals standpoint. It's just funny, but staying in the Cincinnati area, we both
Mhm.
have our Miami University stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
We are
Miami Day?
we are students at the university, and Miami University is now the official university of the Cincinnati Bengals. That's pretty sweet. I think that's awesome, and it's all
Yeah.
stems back to Paul Brown being a graduate of this fine institution in the year 1930.
Mhm. Yeah, I was super excited. Honestly, at the beginning, I was like, "It's kinda random,"
Yeah.
just because in my experience, I have seen them lean a lot more on FC Cincinnati,
Mhm.
in terms of, like, how the organization sponsors with teams in the area, but I'm not upset about it. I think it's awesome. I mean, obviously, we both have a little bit of bias being Miami
Yeah.
students, but we're a great educational program who has a great sports industry, like, organization. We're both part of it. Like, it's awesome. They do everything to put us in the best place, and obviously, we have that huge tie to Paul Brown, who not only founded the Bengals, was an alumni of Miami, but also was one of the main members of our Cradle of Coaches, which is
Mhm.
outside of Yager Stadium. It just shows, again, like, we tie back to this, like, family idea of the Bengals,
Yeah.
which, to jump back to Trey Hendrickson, it just continues to make no sense. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, you value these family values, Hendrickson shows them, and you're not whatever. But back to Miami, I think it's a great deal for both sides, and the video of Greg Crawford throwing the spiral was hilarious. I
That was
enjoyed
pretty
that a
sweet.
lot.
That's pretty sweet. I'm a little jealous because, I mean, my senior year, now that it says right here that a part of the deal that students will get exclusive job shadowing stuff and internship opportunities. I mean, that's awesome for these slam
Yeah,
students coming forward. It's
yeah,
something I wish I would have had, but I mean, not the end of the world, but it's pretty sweet. And I've talked to some
yeah,
other former slam guys ahead of me that they're like, man, this is awesome that this is happening. And these guys are going to have such a great opportunity. And this is the one thing I liked. And also part of the partnership is that the Bengals, I mean, that the Miami is going to be the official red zone sponsorship of the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that's pretty sweet because
yeah,
it
I'm trying to
is
figure out how they're gonna do that.
I don't know. But I mean, you kind of got bits and pieces of that they had a partnership before because I
Mhm,
remember scrolling through social media and like, well, first off, a lot of these professional teams support all the institutions even dipping down to Louisville in just the Cincinnati tri-state area, which is
mhm.
great. The Reds do it, and it's incredible. The Bengals have never really done anything like that, but you kind of saw hints that this was happening because, like, the second quarter score post on the social media page was sponsored by Miami University. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And now here we are, official university of Cincinnati Bengals. And I just think it's cool because, like you said, Paul Brown founded the Bengals, and he is probably the one of the best coaches in alumni period to come out of this school.
Mhm.
And it's just fun how this little town in Ohio has had so much impact on the NFL world because I mean we can
Oh,
dig
we could
deep
do a
into the
whole
cradle of
episode
coaches,
on that.
but
But
it's I
yeah,
mean, yeah, it's
I
incredible.
guess I guess to all the Xavier and the UC people out there who are probably like, "We're literally right next to you. Why did you not pick
Yeah,
us?" You didn't have Paul Brown, we did.
that's
So,
pretty awesome.
but
All
yeah,
right.
it'll be super exciting. I'm hoping to take advantage a little bit of it next
Yes,
semester.
you
So,
should because
we'll
it seems
see.
like a great opportunity, and, like,
Yeah,
it's just awesome, and it's just gonna be I
yeah.
mean, all these different ways for students to get engaged, so, kudos to the Bengals for that, that's pretty awesome.
Mhm.
So, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this show up. This was a great
Yeah,
conversation, we really kinda touched
yeah.
all the points. A lot of stuff going on in the Bengals, I mean, sports is giving us all kinds of stuff to talk about, even in the dead periods, so we'll bring you back here next week, hopefully with some draft prep as we kind of
Yes.
tumble towards, in my opinion, one of the more important drafts in the Bengals' recent history
Yes.
because this kind of sets the
Mhm.
standard for the rest of how this Joe Burrow era is going to go. So for Caroline
Yeah.
Palmer, my name is Owen Timmerding. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the jungle, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.